and welcome to the Can We Ask You This podcast. My name is Corey.
I'm Rosalind.
And we are so grateful for you joining us today. This podcast is a place to hear real stories from real people, gain perspective, and get a little uncomfortable, and maybe even create some change. So we have a special guest with us today. Her name is Nancy.
Nancy is an incredible guest. She is somebody who has experienced a lot of childhood trauma, and that has impacted her life today. And so today on the pod, we're going to hear from Nancy about the trauma that she went through and what the healing journeys looked like. And one of the things I loved the most is that she said, my story's not done. And I think that's something really important with healing. Is it's not like the end, done. Whether you've experienced childhood trauma yourself or have gone through any hard time, I think there's something that everyone can relate to here. So it's a really great story. So let's listen.
Let's jump in. Well, welcome, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us today. I would love for you to start off the conversation, share a little bit about yourself. It's a heavy topic, childhood trauma. So the floor is yours. Like we said, we're here to listen. So would you care just to share maybe a little bit about your childhood, just to give everyone a little bit of a foundation of like where we're coming from for your story?
Sure. I was born small town, military town. I grew up in a military family. Both my parents were in the military up until they got married. And when they got married at that time, only one of the couple could be in the military. And naturally, it was assumed that the man would be the breadwinner. My parents, well, my mother had kind of a tragic upbringing, so it pays forward, right?
Yeah.
We have no idea where my father got his stuff from, because as far as we know, he had a good childhood. Both my parents are now gone, so this conversation is different than it would have been 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But growing up, military family, my father was an alcoholic. He was very abusive towards that I know of. I don't know if he was, he probably was abusive towards my mother. I witnessed, of course, paid that forward to abusing me. And we won't get too in depth with all that kind of stuff. But there was emotional neglect, there was physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, like growing up. So
From your father or both?
Okay, so the emotional neglect was from the parents, the physical, sexual from so it's...
So what did that do for you as a child? Like obviously being able to look back and see how that shaped you and impacted you.
So I was an attention seeker from a very young age because I wasn't getting it at home. And when I was getting it at home, it seemed to be negative. Okay. And this is all perception stuff, right? This is what I remember. So it led me to looking for attention in not necessarily appropriate areas from a very young age. It also led me to be very possessive, very jealous with my friends, like very possessive of my friends.
Yeah.
It was also a very lonely childhood because growing up in the military, like on military bases, there was never anybody around during the summer. And the assumption was we were not allowed in the house during the day. So as someone who is a natural introvert, naturally shy, naturally wanted to kind of hibernate and having to be outside by myself, I remember just being very lonely. So
can I ask why was the assumption that you weren't allowed in the house?
My mother worked nights,
okay,
so she had to sleep during the day, and my father was away during the day. And it was one of those, the time was children were out playing.
Right.
They were, the era was they came home when the streetlights came on, right? So I was not one of those children. My father used to make the comment that when we moved up north, when we moved to Alberta, up to northern Alberta, my brother knew, I swear, every kid on the base within the first week. A year in, I was still struggling to make a friend. So my father was very open about the fact that my brother made friends very, very easily. And I always, to this day, I struggle. Like I've lived in Calgary for 30 plus years, and the amount of friends I have, I can count on like one hand kind of thing. So my perception of my childhood was it was very lonely, and the attention that I received was very negative. This led to teenagehood. I was starting to get the attention that I was seeking, not appropriate attention. And this led to very inappropriate behaviors, leading to me having 3 children before I turned 20.
Wow.
And So it was a mess. And the abuse never stopped. So it went from family to partners and friends and stuff, or friends, pseudo friends. So, yeah.
Can I ask a little bit about what sort of, I'm going to call them lies, but what did you believe about yourself to be true as a child because of that abuse and carrying forward into having to a place where you had 3 kids before 20? What did you think of yourself? And if you don't want to answer it, that's okay too.
No, that's fine. It's how to put it.
Yeah.
So I was not worthy, and that still attacks me. I am not worthy. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of a good life. I'm not worthy of positive attention. I'm only useful for a specific role, and oftentimes I'm not even worthy to exist. So I've had suicidal tendencies. Now the term is suicidal ideation since I was 13 years old.
Wow.
So I had a plan. I've had multiple plans throughout the years, and they're by the grace of God. They haven't been fully acted on. So.
Wow. And are you in touch with your kids?
Yes, I have relationships with all 3 of my children.
Wow.
I gave the eldest up for adoption, and she sought me out probably, I'm going to say about 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
She found me, and yeah, I have relationships with all of my children, which is hugely something to be said. Because I was a really young parent, my children very much paid for my inexperience, for my childhood trauma, all that kind of stuff. And I've always told my kids, you know, if ever you need me in a psychologist's office to yell at me for an hour in the interest of your healing, please.
Wow. So like looking back, how did your childhood impact your future relationships and as you grew up and into life?
Well, to be really blunt, I'm now pushing 50. I'm single because I don't feel I'm worthy of a relationship.
Okay.
Okay.
So the relationships have been on again, off again. And they were extremely codependent. So I would attach myself to someone and almost like a leech, right? I would detach and I would suck all the energy out of the relationship, and then it would turn abusive in whatever form, whether it be verbal, whether it be like whatever form. It would turn toxic, I guess is a better word for it.
Yeah.
Did you know it was toxic? Because I'm just thinking, if you grew up in that environment, how do you know what's a normal relationship supposed to look like?
What's between
You don't
toxic
have
and
you don't
not,
have the normal.
I didn't. And this was my precedent, right? The only one I realized was toxic was the last one towards the end.
Okay.
And I walked away from it because I could not live like that any longer. And I knew the common denominator in every toxic relationship I had all across the board, whether that be with my parents, my brother, friendships, you know, men, whatever the case may be, the common denominator in every toxic relationship was me. So I knew I had to work on me. So when I left the last relationship, I was like, that's it. I can't do this. I need to get help in some way, shape, or form.
I actually think that's quite amazing that you could have the self-awareness to notice that. So kudos to you. I don't think a lot of people, I think it takes a lot of time, which I mean, I guess it did for you, but to say that, I don't think anybody in your shoes would blame you if you didn't see it. So
I watched friends go through it, and I watched friends bounce from, and I did it. I bounced from relationship to relationship to relationship. I watched friends still go through it. When my mother passed away when I was in my mid-20s. And any form of foundation that I had, I lost. It crumbled, okay? And I was not raised in the church. I was not raised with a faith. My parents went through what they had to make it look good. So my brother and I received our Catholic sacraments. But once we received the one at grade 6, that was it. The only time we attended church was with extended family. So when my mother passed away, any belief that I had in a higher power was gone. I wasn't angry. I mean, if I was angry with God, it wasn't for very long at all, because I saw that it was my mother's life choices that took her from us. But I had to spend that time building a foundation. So I've been building a foundation for way more years than I'd like to admit.
yeah.
No, it's okay.
So, but that path has taken me down so many paths. It's taken me down, like, I've learned so much over the years, and for a very long time, I've been what I call a self-help junkie, which is what caused me to realize, hey, this relationship is toxic, I need to work on me.
I wanted to ask about that, like the starting of your healing journey, because you talked about that, like that one relationship where you started recognizing some of those toxic behaviors. So what was the start of your healing journey? And I'd love for you to kind of, what worked, what didn't work, right? Why did you decide to pursue a healing journey or become a self-help junkie?
Yeah.
So when I turned 30, I was miserable with my life. I had lost my mother. My son, my youngest, was very high needs. He was special needs, but I like to call him high needs as opposed to special needs because, his diagnoses are different. He was special needs behaviorally. So by the time I hit 30, I was miserable. I wasn't married. I'd yet to be married. I was trying to raise 2 children with a man who was not their father and who had no interest. That was kind of my tipping point where I hit a do or die point. And I've hit a few of those throughout my years. Mm-hmm. But that was the big catalyst. So that started my self-help journey. I looked into the quick fixes. I looked into like energy healing, new age stuff, Wicca, all kinds of stuff like that. And I went really far down a lot of those paths. And you have no idea how many energy healers did work on me and said, you're all fixed now. You're good to go. You'll lose weight. You'll do this. You'll do that. And I'm like, here I am still 80 pounds overweight, So I reached a point when I left my ex that something had to be done. And I contacted my employer and gained access to the employee assistance program for psychology, for a psychologist. And I met with her, and because through the EAP, your sessions are very limited, right? You've only got a few sessions. She turned around and she recommended a couple of books, and she says, I'm sorry, there's not a whole lot I can do with the time that we have.
Right.
So following her, I got put into Alberta Mental Health, their system, or Calgary Mental Health Authority system. So within a year, between the time I left my ex to the time my father passed away, it was something like 10 or 11 months. I had seen a PhD psychologist, 2 psychiatrists, and 2 therapists. And their general consensus was that I was too hard on myself. And I had snowed them so much that they discharged me and closed my file the week after my father passed away.
Wow.
So telling me that I had a good handle on life.
Wow.
So a psychiatrist tried to medicate me, and I'm like, I'm a zombie. I can't do this. I drive for my living. There's no way I can drive in this shape. And that was at the lowest dosage. And they keep telling you to let it get into your system, get used to it. And I'm like, I can't do this.
Can I ask a question too? I'm just wondering, was it scary when you came to the place where you thought, okay, I have to change? I almost think once you acknowledge it, it puts a lot of pressure on. Was that scary? Just the fear of failure and stuff like that? And then meeting roadblocks, like what was that like?
So what was most scary about it was the timeline. I didn't know how long it was going to take me to reach a state of peace. And I couldn't mentally, emotionally live like that anymore.
You wanted the quick fix?
Sorry?
Like you wanted the quick fix?
It wasn't even so much that I wanted the quick fix. I wanted to know what I was looking forward to. I knew the journey was going to be hard, but I wanted to know how hard it was going to be and how long it was going to take.
You like a plan.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, some form of idea. And had I known, 5 years in, I would still be a total mess, then I'm like, I don't know if I would have signed up for it.
Maybe it's a good thing, right? Yeah.
So I started Celebrate Recovery within FAC.
That's our church.
Yes. So when I came here, I was not a Christian, did not identify as a Christian, just came in here strictly for Celebrate Recovery because it was recommended to me. And I came in here as an attention addict. The used to be term was codependent. For me, it was a little bit more. I was an addict to attention. I didn't care who I got it from, where I got it, nothing. I needed attention.
Did it matter if it was bad or good?
It did not matter if it was bad or good. I preferred good, but
Right.
it was such that if I went into Starbucks and someone behind the counter is like, hey, how are, like really enthusiastic to chat with me, even though, you know, that's who they are, I would continue to go back to that Starbucks. So
I used to work at Starbucks. We loved it when people would do that, but it's just interesting hearing the other side.
Yes.
That was a little mini fix in a way. Yeah.
It very much was. Very much was. So when I came in, this was my last ditch effort. I had been through the psychologist, psychiatrist, all that kind of stuff. I gave myself a year.
Wow.
If I did not see change in a year, I had given myself permission to live life however, even to take my life, if that's what I wanted.
Wow.
So I gave myself a year and had no idea what I'd never done a 12-step program before, which is what CR is, Celebrate Recovery is. It's a 12-step program, but it's a Christ-based 12-step program. The reason I came here was because it was not addiction specific. Whereas most of them, like CODA, Codependence Anonymous, or Alcoholics Anonymous, narcotics, you know, this one was not addiction specific. Had I known now what I knew then.
Maybe good you didn't.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when did you first realize that Jesus was healing you from some of your past trauma? Like, you know, you come into this place, not a follower of Jesus, just being like, I'm going to give this a shot, right? So when did you have this experience of like, oh, Jesus, he's working in my life. There's something is going on here.
I actually had an aha moment, as Oprah calls it.
Yeah.
So I was cruising up Deerfoot, driving school bus. I drove special needs kids.
And Deerfoot, just if anybody's not in Calgary, that's a major highway in Calgary. Yeah.
That is our major highway. So I was coming up the Deerfoot and someone had cut me off. And if you have a history of trauma or anything like that, you've got that ball of anger that sits in your abdomen, right? And I went to draw on it, to rage on this person that cut off a school bus with special needs kids, right? Big wheelchair stickers all over this thing. And it was gone. I did not have anything to draw on. And I was meeting with Pastor Heather Brown later on that afternoon. And I said, I was so ticked off because I could not draw on this anger.
Ironic.
And this was about 6 months into my CR journey.
Wow.
So we had been going through, I had been working the steps, I had been doing the program. And so, yeah, it took about 6 months for me to realize, hey, this is actually working.
Wow.
So had you accepted Jesus at that point? Or what was that experience like?
So I had accepted Jesus probably a couple of months into it. And, the woman who greeted me that night at CR, that poor woman. I'm like, I am really surprised she and I still have a relationship because I raged on my thoughts on God, on Jesus, on the Bible, the whole thing. And she just sat there and took it and nodded and just encouraged me to come back. So, and, you know, here I am, 4.5 years later.
Wow.
So
I'm sorry, I just need to fill in the gaps a little bit. You were raging about your thoughts about God and then you accepted him that same day?
So not that same day.
Okay.
It was a few months later. So it was a few months later that I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to this. And what have I got to lose? That was my whole attitude. What have I got to lose?
Yeah.
So I accepted. And it's funny because I began CR, it was March of that year, so 2018, March of
4 years ago?
Yeah. I got baptized here, January of 2019.
Wow. You gave him a year.
I did. And it was a question, like it was a question mark. And Heather Brown, bless her, she was my sponsor throughout that first year. She's the one that has all the blackmail material on me right now. We had the really in-depth, should I or should I not get baptized? And it came down to, what have I got to lose?
So my wife is a mental health nurse. And so I'm kind of curious because we have lots of conversations about the physical side of like needing medication and processing. But I want to ask you, what did Jesus do for you that a psychiatrist couldn't?
And not to say, by the way, that.
Were
You going to say that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah.
We understand. We are for obviously if you need medication or anything like that, like therapy, all that kind of stuff. Jesus is special. He's special, and that's where the question comes out of. Like, what did Jesus do for you that a psychiatrist couldn't?
So I have been in some form of counseling since I was like 13 throughout. And even now I still do counseling. This has been an amazing, a truly awesome journey for me.
Wow.
I have needed the counseling as much as I have needed Jesus. So when you're dealing with stuff like childhood trauma, abuses, addictions, stuff like that, you cannot separate them. You cannot separate the mental health aspect. But for me personally, I needed Jesus as an advocate for my mental health, I guess is the best way to put it.
Oh, that's good.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Forgiveness is huge
Yeah.
when you're going through a healing process.
Yeah.
And I still get very angry towards them for multiple reasons. Number one, for leaving me an orphan, because it's lifestyle choices which cause them to do so. Number two, for basically the stuff they put me through as a teenager and as an adult. Like, my father was lecturing me literally the day he died about my food habits, my job, all that kind of stuff. And it was only a few months before he died that I realized that I harbor such anger towards him. And over time, most of that anger has depleted. But every once and again, it comes up and I'm like,
Yeah.
But what really got me was when we were shut down for COVID. And had I not gone through the bulk of this journey prior to, there's no way I would have made it through COVID.
Wow.
You know, I'm single. I live alone, or mostly alone. My daughter was living with me part-time. My community, my church community, had shut down. I lost both my jobs for 6 months. So essentially for 6 months, I was on my own. So thankful for friends who kind of took pity on me and we're not listening to these COVID restrictions things. We are going for a walk, or we are doing this, or we are doing that. So I realized during that year to 2 year period, because things really still aren't normal, right? That I really wished I had my parents, toxic and all, so that, you know, when we shut down, I could have, you know, we could have driven each other crazy in the same house.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
When my mother passed away, growing up, my mother's and my relationship was very volatile. And when she had passed away, we had healed it to the point where I considered her a friend.
Wow.
But the relationship was so volatile that when she died, it was as much of a relief as it was grief.
That's really honest. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I'm sure you're not the only person that's felt like that, and that must be really hard to process, feeling relieved.
That was as much to deal with as the toxic relationship was. Feeling the guilt over being relieved that I no longer had. And it was both my parents. Yeah. Feeling the guilt of being relieved that I no longer had to have every move I made questioned by my parents. So, I mean, if my father knew that I worked at an oil and gas camp right now, he'd be happy that I'm making the money, but he'd be really, you know, down on me for working away for 2 weeks out of every 3. So
there's some freedom there. Yeah.
So for adults who have experienced some childhood trauma to various extents and have yet to find healing from their past, what would you say to them?
Don't give up. Healing can happen. Know your audience. Really research your audience, both in who you're just generally chit-chatting to, who you're getting help from, who you've chosen to include in your life. Because a lot of times, energy matches energy. So if we're in do not like to use this term, but it's the easiest way to explain it. Where we're in a victim mentality, we attract similar. So we attract other people who are in victim mentalities. So, and that just perpetuates the cycle, the
Right.
constant complaining, the constant, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, or I deserve this, right?
Yeah.
So the first step would be to get out of that. But there's also a readiness factor. And so many people, while they're in the thick of being caught in that cycle, just aren't ready. I don't know how often I've heard, I have a friend who's an alcoholic, or I have a friend who's dealing with this or that. You know, you've gotten help. How can I get them help? You can't.
Yeah.
So, and no matter how much you try, you can't. The only thing you can do is just love on them.
Yeah.
So.
I also want to ask a question about what would you say to somebody who, you know, you said it's taken you 5 years. And I mean, the journey, it's not like it's over. So what do you say to somebody who's maybe starting on the journey of healing, but it's just taken a while, or they're not feeling it, or feel like they're hitting a wall every day? How do you deal with that?
I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there. It was probably a year and a half or so ago when I hit my biggest wall. So I had something happen to me at work that triggered, and it opened almost a waterfall of PTSD trauma. So and so this has been my last year and a half. You're going to encounter, it's going to take time. You're going to encounter all kinds of stuff is going to come up, all kinds of stuff. It's like you and I were talking the other day that I feel like I'm a fraud because I'm still going through so much of the hard work. But with every piece that I work through, there's a sense of peace and freedom that I have never, ever in my almost half century experienced. So the first 6 months, I cleared away all the surface stuff, all the stuff that was causing me to be angry in the moment, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as time has gone on, another layer of that onion would peel away. And now we're getting into the deeper work. And now we're getting into the even deeper work.
What does your routine look like? Just practically speaking, we recognize a lot of this will come from counseling and the deep work, but what is your routine like with meeting with Jesus and letting him heal those places? What does that practically look like for you? And how do you maintain that on the days when you're like, I don't want to, or I'm tired, or whatever?
I don't.
Okay, very honest.
I mean, to be very honest, I suck at it. I suck at a routine. I spend time. I do my best to spend time every day in devotion, in the Bible. That time, oftentimes, is literally like 2 minutes. So my prayer life sucks.
I love how honest you're being, because I think a lot of us, I was just talking to somebody and she said, if you ever want to make a Christian feel guilty, ask them about their devotions time.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we should say, hey, 2 minutes. You took 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's something, right? Like,
It's commitment to doing it. And it's the thing I've realized over the last especially over the last, let's say 6 months since I've started this new job, because I'm actually working with adults now instead of, children. Although sometimes
sometimes hard to tell the difference.
Exactly. But over the last 6 months, there's been a lot of slaps across the face that I've gotten in that, okay, I feel like I've reverted right back to when I started, or I feel like, the anger's coming up again, or stuff like that, right? So I know I've got a ways to go still, but what's different between now and before my healing journey is I recognize it almost immediately. After the fact, mind you, but
Still recognize
almost
it.
immediately.
Yeah.
So I can turn around and make the steps. If I need to make amends, apologize, then I do so immediately. And so often that opens a very honest conversation. But this is not a fix-it journey. This is a work in progress journey. And we're working until we are no more, right? Until we, as I like to say, go home.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really, really important to recognize.
That we're all works in progress.
I heard a quote, and do with it what you will, but I heard somebody say, I'm a masterpiece and a work in progress all at the same time, because we are God's masterpiece, but he's also working in us every single day. And I think we can claim both parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are some days that I sit down and spend an hour in studies or even longer. But there are some days that I'll be like, hi, God, time to start my day. So.
I'm late, sorry. Or whatever. Yeah, we all done that, right? Yeah. And that's I really appreciate your honesty there.
Yeah. A lot of it is, and a friend and I are going through an in-depth study right now. A lot of it is because I didn't grow up in it. This is still very new to me.
Yeah.
So I've not habituated any of the prayer life, any of that. So this is all me trying to habituate, and I don't want to make it a habit. I want to make it real, right?
Yeah.
So
that being said, like habits, it's just the setting up the time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there's a balance there too, but
I have it in my calendar.
Yeah.
Alarm, spend time with God.
Right. Well, good for you.
There you go.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's really, really awesome that you put it in your calendar. Smart. So
Nancy, thank you for sharing with us. Is there any kind of like final thoughts, final words, something that you want to get off your chest or share that you haven't been able to share yet today?
The other thing I would say is just keep swimming.
It's a good quote.
Yeah. That's all we can do.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being so honest and vulnerable. And I know your story is your story, but I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We really appreciate you. Yeah, and your openness and honesty and just being able to kind of let it all out. So thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a catharsis in doing this, a freedom in sharing the story.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, thanks. What a great episode.
Yes.
I loved talking to Nancy or more listening to Nancy. What was your takeaway, Corey?
What really struck me was just the process of healing and her desire to want to continue healing, to continue that process, and her resilience, honestly, and not giving up. And she also mentioned, if you want healing, like you have to make that decision. Like you can want healing for someone else,
right? But it has to be
their decision to do it. So again, her resilience to keep processing through her hurts, her pain, because it's never comfortable. Like going through your past childhood trauma, like that is not a comfortable experience. Kidding. But for her to know that in order to find healing, like you can't bury it, you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then obviously her giving it to Jesus and letting Jesus work in her heart to find healing.
I think that what you said there too is it's a lot of hard work. And I know in my life, when I've recognized that I need healing, sometimes I just sit there for a day or so and I'm like, I don't want to, because it's going to be tiring. I'm a planner, so I like to know, okay, by March, I will be healed now. But that's not how healing works. And so I just really admire how she is willing to persist in it. And like she said, just keep swimming.
Yeah, just keep swimming.
Yeah. And I think I'm a swimmer, and I know that there's days where you don't want to show up, you don't want to swim, you don't feel like you can hold your breath and keep swimming, but you just do it because there's days where it feels really good, and eventually you're going to get to the surface or you're going to get to the end. But I think it takes a lot of endurance and a lot of dedication. And
it's not always easy, and it's not always like a straight line. So I think hearing her now, knowing that she's still in the process of healing, but looking back over the 4.5 years, seeing how far she has come, and I know, and I hope she's proud of herself for the work that she has done, to be able to look back and see how far she has come in her healing journey.
Yeah.
Because it's quite a commitment. It is.
Yeah. And sometimes you forget too. You can feel like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere, or this process is taking forever or whatever. But all you have to do is look back at where was I? Like she said, talking when she was driving a bus and she wanted to be angry, but she couldn't be angry.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was really, really powerful too. So I'm inspired by her story. And I really, really loved how real she was, because I think that's what makes it so relatable is honestly, we've all struggled with maintaining a rhythm where we meet with Jesus every day. And even that is so relatable. Well, we've all struggled with not forgiving somebody or forgiving, like in the case of a brother, forgiving someone, but not having that relationship. That's hard too. Or the guilt. Oh man, the guilt for feeling relief with the death of a parent. I don't know, but I can imagine that that would be very confusing. And those are big feelings to work through. I think that's probably going to take time for her too. But she's so open to letting Jesus do the work in her life. And she's committed to the work that she has to do. That's part of the process. And
Yeah.
I admire her a lot.
So thank you, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing with us today.
Listeners, if you guys have any feedback, any comments you want to say, we're going to put in the show notes how you can get in touch with us. We're still a new podcast, so we're still figuring that out. But by the time this comes out, that'll be in the show notes and you can contact us there and let us know your feedback, your thoughts. We'd love for this to be a conversation that continues, so don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Can we ask you this podcast?
We'll see you next time. Well, we won't see you. We'll hear you. No, you'll hear us. Okay, talk to you later.